game's the big one, isn't it?
I think so. If you care about any of the game, then it's that one, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that these I've got National League on the brain after the kick-off of this Saturday. The Nations League, if it is going to matter, it is these kind of big matches. Like we saw when England beat sort of Spain, they can mean something.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
and hopefully this is it'll be a good marker for them to kind of like see where they are. For the Euros in 2021, and hopefully a win in the friendly and 6 points, and everything will look so rosy with this young English team coming through.
Absolutely. The games can't be any worse than they were in September, can they? I mean, I don't think that's possible. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I think that's more than enough talk about international football. So this week saw the qualifiers completed for the group stages of the Champions League and the Europa League. So England have the Premier League had 4 spaces. None of the teams had to qualify anymore. So I think that's a shame because it makes it harder for countries like Scotland and Portugal and Holland, and all these teams have got to go through sort of crazy levels of qualifying in order to get there. Celtic fell at the second hurdle when they lost to Ferencváros, which, looking at it now, in the group that Ferencváros have been drawn in, Celtic must be absolutely kicking themselves. But we'll talk about Celtic later on. So what we'll do, James, if it's all right with you, is we'll just go through the 8 Champions League groups. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of this format. I think we've discussed this in the past. I think it favours the bigger teams. So, I mean, even if you're looking at like the fact that Inter and Lazio and stuff like that, they're in pot 3, which is crazy to think about. And it just gives them a chance to the days of the one-off kind of home, of springing a shock. Those days are gone, and you get where the organisers are coming from, because there's so much money involved in the game that they want to see Bayern Munich play PSG in the final. They don't want to have a repeat of the time where it was Monaco against Porto, I think it was, wasn't it? I mean, that's hardly a glamour tie, is it? But so what we'll do is we'll go through the 8 groups. We'll obviously concentrate on the ones with the English teams on them a bit more. But so Group A, Bayern Munich, Atletico Madrid, Salzburg, and Lokomotiv Moscow. I think there's only really 2 teams getting out of that group. Do you think?
I think so. Yeah, I think and I think Salzburg are a decent team, and I think they could be in for the Europa League, sort of when the
Celtic played them in the league last season, and they were a decent side. Celtic struggled with them, so I think it's a tough group for them. But I think that they would be favourites for me to finish third, I would have thought. I
think so. Yeah.
Then Group B, Real Madrid, Shakhtar Donetsk, Inter Milan, and Borussia Mönchengladbach.
Yes. So it's Mönchengladbach they were the 4th seeds, weren't they?
Yes, they were. They're in pot 4. Yeah.
I think there's another team. I think Marseille were as well, weren't they, later on?
Yeah, Marseille.
That's the thing. You do. I think a bit like in the Premier League, as we've seen, and in the Bundesliga, in La Liga as well, in La Liga, and in the French league, all the top leagues we've seen. So some quite surprising results early on. I know Paris Saint-Germain got beat early, and so it's there could be some weird results because you don't know what sort of stage teams are at in their prep.
Yeah,
and you don't know if, like, I don't know if the Austrian league, for example, is up and running. But if they just plan around these 6 matches, they could, they could sort of do a shock in the. So it's like Salzburg in the first group there. But I still do think I do think overall, when it comes down to it, 6 matches is enough for the big teams to come through. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think in most cases.
I think the other thing is, like, you don't know what. So Bayern, Real Madrid, for example, Real Madrid play Borussia Mönchengladbach at the Bernabeu, right? In front of 80,000 people, expectations high, the crowd behind them. Real Madrid playing Borussia Mönchengladbach at an empty Bernabeu.
Yeah.
You just don't know. I mean, like looking at the results, and you just looking at the Premier League in isolation, and the amount of away wins and teams going to places where they're not expected to win and coming away with results. I think they might see some interesting results. But as you say, 6 games are enough for a Real Madrid to get out of a group, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so So moving on to Group C. Now, Manchester City are in this group. They were in pot 2. So they probably got the best possible draw from pot A in Porto and the worst possible draw from pot C, which is Marseille. And Olympiacos are the other team making up that group. So Man City have struggled in Europe of late. They obviously got to the semi-finals this year, but do you really, what do you think? Have they strengthened enough for you to make a proper tilt at the Champions League?
I mean, I think you mentioned before about how you use an example like of Mönchengladbach going to, say, the Bernabeu, and I think part of the thing is I think teams feel a lot more confident now to have a game plan, and I think players are sticking to those game plans a lot more. So they don't have a right back doesn't have someone shouting at him to boot it long or to get tight on the man. But if he knows what his game plan is, he's more happy to stick with it rather than having the crowd shouting at him to get stuck in or put a tackle in, those sort of things. When really, surprisingly, the footballers know better than the crowd, like what they're meant to be doing in certain situations. So I do think Man City this season have shown like to be susceptible to teams that kind of set up well and then not just park the bus and pack defenders in around the 6-yard box. Like, they are teams that have just got a plan, and Man City seem to have fallen into traps in the last 2 weeks. So I think they'll qualify because I think they'll beat Porto and probably Marseille at home. Yeah. And that'll be enough. That'll be enough even if they drop points away against them, because I think Olympiacos will get no point. They'll be the weakest one, won't they? They'll be the. So I do reckon Man City will go through, but I think there could be a few wobbles, and I wouldn't. I know it's only a few weeks ago that I sort of predicted them to finish second in the Premier League. I do think they still will, but I don't think that they will make much of a mark in Europe.
No, I agree.
Unless their new sort of the new centre back they've signed is a lot better than and he could be the replacement for Vincent Kompany, but I doubt that'll still be enough for them to go deep into Europe.
Yeah, so I agree.
Qualify, but I think that'll be it.
So I was different. I've got them finishing fourth, so I don't particularly think they'll do that well. I think like they'll get out of the group, but I don't think they'll threaten the latter stages too much. Mm-hmm. Okay, on to Group D, Liverpool, Ajax, Atalanta and Midtjylland. So again, that looks like quite a straightforward group for Liverpool on paper, although the Aston Villa result notwithstanding today. They look as if they should have too much for all three of those teams.
I think so. Yeah, I think Ajax are the type of team that have caused English teams a lot of problems over the last sort of few years, or over the last pretty much the whole time I've been watching football. That kind of technical skill, that sort of being able to keep the ball. However, I think that plays right into Liverpool's hand. I think if you get at Liverpool, you can really hurt them. Aston Villa aren't going to. Aston Villa are doing that.
Yeah, they are.
Ajax aren't going to do that. So I think that threat will be kind of negated, and I think I think Liverpool will get through quite comfortably. It just depends, unless and that's the thing we have to put into sort of brackets for all these Premier League teams, depending on what the schedule could get very, very grueling for them. Yeah, but I think squad-wise, I think all the teams have got a decent enough squad, apart from maybe one team that we'll mention later. Yeah, I think they've all got a big enough squad to be able to rotate enough players in and out to hopefully keep them all fresh. That I think they should all qualify okay-ish. Yeah, apart from one team we're going to mention a bit later.
So moving on to Group E, which is Chelsea's group. So they're in with Seville. I don't know how to pronounce it like that. They're in with Seville. They're in with Krasnodar and Rennes from the French league. Again, you don't really see Chelsea having too many problems with that. I think Chelsea have probably done the most impressive business in the transfer window out of the sort of the four English teams involved in Europe. And they seem to have come on to a bit of a game in the last sort of two. Well, they went out of the Carabao Cup. Sorry, I couldn't remember the sponsor there. They were out of the Carabao Cup at the weekend, but they were really impressive yesterday. I reckon Chelsea will be fine. I think they'll have more than enough, and I can't see anyone other than Chelsea and Seville coming out of that group.
I think so. Yeah, I think Rennes would have been like a tough team, but Chelsea basically have just taken their goalkeeper off them, and he's now their goalkeeper, Mendy. Yes. So I don't think they'll be able to. I think he was a big reason for them sort of doing quite well last season, and so I think that'll be quite comfortable. And again, the size of their squad, the young players that they've got, they can bring in and out. I think defensively, they've still got some issues, definitely.
Well, Pulisic is back as well. He was playing yesterday, wasn't he? So I think that he's going to be a massive player for them. We talked about that when we were like sort of previewing the season, weren't we? About how exciting a player he was and how well he played before. He got that injury in the FA Cup final, didn't he? But I think Chelsea and Seville easily from that group for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so that moves us on to Group F. So this is Zenit St. Petersburg, Borussia Dortmund, Lazio and Club Brugge. So again, I think that's between three. I think Club Brugge will be the kind of spoiler / whipping boys of that group, but then it's any of the other three. I like Dortmund. I don't. Do you know, it all stems back to the fact when Paul Lambert played for them.
Yes, yeah.
And I think that because he was like the Scottish guy who won the European Cup, you know. So like, and then because we all bunked off school back in the 90s and went to Fir Park for some reason it was on in the afternoon, like Motherwell against Dortmund at the Champions League, and so we all, I think it was even the European Cup back then, but so we all nicked off to see Dortmund play and stuff. So I've always had a soft spot for Dortmund since then. So I'm hoping that they can get out of that group. But I think it's Dortmund, Zenit, or Lazio. Any two from.
I think I don't know. I think of Zenit St. Petersburg as another Europa League challenger. I think Lazio will, although Lazio didn't do too well in the Europa League last year, did they?
No, they did not. They lost home and away to Celtic.
Yes. Yeah.
To be fair, Celtic were incredible on both of those nights.
Yes,
as I say, Lazio aren't the force they were, but still to go to that stadium and win was an absolutely massive achievement for Celtic. And we'll talk about. In fact, we might as well go on and talk about them now, because Group G is Juventus, Barcelona, Dynamo Kiev, and Ferencváros. So this would have been, well, I don't know, because Celtic would have been in pot 4. So they would like to say that, if it's a sliding doors moment, it would be Celtic Group G with those two giants and Dynamo Kiev. I think that probably the biggest disappointment or the biggest frustration is Celtic are just murder at the moment. They don't seem to be they're still getting the points on the board. And like today, for example, they beat St Johnstone 2-0, but they scored both goals after 90 minutes. And they're just making heavy weather of absolutely everything. Like, not last week, notwithstanding, and they beat Hibs quite comfortably, which we'll talk about later. But I think that night against Ferencváros was so disappointing. Now, as anyone who listens to this podcast knows, I have no love for the old firm. I would happily cart them off to the Premier League and move on without them. But when it does come to European nights, I do quite enjoy a Thursday night when Rangers are on at 6:00 and Celtic are on at 8:30. It's quite a nice sort of evening's viewing. And I think they raise the profile of the league when they do well in Europe, and they absolutely looked amazing going into that game. They'd beaten Hamilton quite comfortably, then they'd thumped Reykjavik, and we're thinking, you know what, this is going to Celtic. I've got a decent tilt at this. Mm-hmm. Then they sort of capitulated to Ferencváros, and they found themselves in the Europa League again. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb, right, and say that I'm not too sure if for this year Rangers or Celtic are overly bothered about European football. I think they'll put in a showing and they'll do the minimum to ensure, which they have done, they've qualified for the Europa League and stuff. But I think everything in Celtic's mentality is about winning 10 in a row, and everything about Rangers is about stopping Celtic winning 10 in a row, which we'll talk about later. But so I think the only disappointment for Group G for me is that it's Ferencváros that are there and not Celtic. But is there any way that it's not going to be Juventus and Barcelona getting out of that group?
No. And the thing is, though, as well, it could have been because they'll probably split draws between themselves or something similar. Yeah. And they'll whip both Ferencváros and Dynamo Kiev. And you do think that Celtic could have just not got beaten by as many goals, and maybe taken a point away at sort of in Kiev. Then they could have had they could have had a chance to actually qualify for the Europa League through the through that. That would have given real impetus going into the latter stages of the Europa League, as opposed to whatever's going to happen to him.
Yeah,
but I definitely think you're right about the but their both their focuses might be somewhere else.
Yeah, I
it's definitely going to be the big
so.
two in that group.
So that moves